I'd just like to go back to, what's wrong with this here? I'd like to, this isn't working. I don't know what's wrong.
Share microphone.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to go back to something that was said earlier. Ms. Ferrante mentioned that I would take money out of the stabilization budget. I never said that. I don't think you heard me say that. So I don't know where you came up with that, making things up again. There you go again. Basically, I would not take money out of the stabilization budget. I support that, and we can thank the treasurer for maintaining a good stabilization budget. That's good. But in terms of, if you look at right now, Massachusetts is 47th out of 50 states in indebtedness. This is wrong. This is not something that should be happening right now. We should not be borrowing our way into the future. Yes, we have a good bond rating because we have a good stabilization fund, but we shouldn't be balancing the budget on the backs of our citizens, and that's what's going on right now. Going back to the bridge issue, a study just came out yesterday, you may have seen this, where Massachusetts right now is one of the most expensive states in the country for producing roadways and bridges. Over $80,000 per mile. That's 8 times what the average state pays for producing bridges and roadways per mile. So, okay, thank you.
Michael, please. Thank you, Michael. If I recollect to that answer, you said that you mentioned the $500 million we have in surplus, and that's where you would find the money. Right now in the state budget, what happens is our surpluses have been going in directly to the general fund. That's one of, to the general fund and then to the stabilization fund, which is one of the reasons why we have built, in the worst economy, have built the 4th largest stabilization fund in the country. Now let me tell you what else we spent our surplus on last year. It wasn't new spending, as my opponent would have you believe. We actually paid 4 years of pension liability down early. Again, we want to signal to the business community. We want to signal to those who rate our economy that we are responsible and that we are paying down our debts early, not on time, but early. As for the expense of the bridges, I've called for an audit. I'm probably one of the few Democrats that has called for as many audits against my administration of my own party, and I would suggest this. There's probably not a Republican out there during the Republican administrations that called for more audits.
Okay, the next question is going to be asked by Mr. Lamont, first to Ann-Margaret, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Weber to let me know how many more questions we'll be able to handle after this.
Okay, Ann-Margaret. Fisheries in the harbor. While much of fisheries regulation and management is at the federal level, the state still retains a significant role, obviously, from the handling of the aid that's being given out now to state permitting and other issues. What state-level initiatives or changes would you seek to bolster the fishing industry specifically over the next 2 years?
Thank you. Hands down, better science. I've spoke to President Corrett at UMass. There's a plan in place where we're discussing the feasibility of moving the marine biology department at UMass Boston down here to Gloucester to Lanesville. What we would do in that instance is we would have graduate students that would be working with us as well as undergraduates and working with the fishermen to obtain more data. In addition to that, I've worked very hard with Raytheon, with MIT, with Northeastern to bring sonar technology to our fisheries, where, if you can believe this or not, we actually have the capability, it's just a matter of negotiating it with the Defense Department, where we can actually take a sonar machine, it hangs down from a helicopter, it dips into the ocean, and the military could actually transcribe for us what's in the ocean, how many whales, how many cod, how many haddock, how many whatever, and see what the dispersal of fish is. In addition to that, I mentioned the project that I'm working with Joe Rosa and the biotechnology, the scientists from biotechnology, who are examining, and I funded the sonar, I funded the biotech initiative to learn whether or not Gulf of Maine cod is one species or is it 2. If it's 1, it changes the management regime in its entirety. If it's two, things stay the same. If it's an answer other than one or two of those, you'll have to stay tuned because I don't know what the answer will be. In addition to that, Lenny Linquato and the work that we're doing. The state has the ability to make investments in the infrastructure within the harbor to make sure that those shoreside businesses survive. And third, the lobbying that we were able to do for short-term assistance for fishermen with Elizabeth Warren and the federal delegation.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a shame. We've witnessed the complete destruction of the fishing industry, one of the oldest fishing seaport in the United States. And this has been under the hands of, as we know, NOAA, which falls under the Department of Commerce, who are appointed by the president at the top level. This is sad, it's disgusting, and we need to do everything that we can to fight back against this. The problem is, it's a little late. It's 70% of the fishing vessels that I'm aware of, and I may be off a little bit on that number, have disappeared. And this is just a very, very sad situation. So yes, we need to do everything we can to help the fishermen. One of the things I've thought about is we should probably look at the potential to basically create a moratorium on the taxes that fishermen would normally pay. Basically give them a zero tax period where they don't have to pay any taxes. An example is as the aid they just got. We found out when they were receiving the aid, which in my opinion was a pittance and almost a slap in the face where a lot of that money went elsewhere, that they had to file as vendors for the state, which took even longer for them to get their aid. In addition to that, they're probably going to have to pay taxes on that money. So on the $30,000, and again, I may be off a little bit on that number, but they'll probably end up with $15,000 to $20,000 depending on the tax bracket they're in. So sort of a slap in the face. So we need to do everything possible. I would support everything possible. In addition to what I mentioned earlier, by creating manufacturing jobs here on Cape Ann, good, full-time, year-round jobs where people could be trained and transition into those jobs at this point.
Yeah, I agree with supporting manufacturing jobs, but not at the expense of fishing jobs. So let me go back to three more things that I would like to, that I have done to help the fishing industry on the state level. Strategic plan. Every year now, the Secretary of Economic Affairs must meet with the Secretary of Economic Affairs, and the two of them together, environment and economic, have to come up with the strategic economic plan for our fisheries. Number two, I led on the fight for a tax credit for small fisheries and farming businesses. So although it may not be a lot, it's one more tool for fishermen to get back money from this tax credit. Third, we created a seafood marketing commission which will focus on marketing Massachusetts seafood products and fish, grown local. We've all heard buy local in the programs that we have for buy local. This is something that Roger Berkowitz, the CEO of Legal Seafoods, has been a big part of. How do we market our fish around the country, and by saying that it's local, caught here, fresh from our oceans, increase the price that we receive. I also voted and led the charge on putting $100,000 into that Seafood Marketing Commission to give it the ability it needs to work. Now, my opponent says that the money that Elizabeth Warren led on was a mere pittance. So perhaps you need to contact the Republicans down in Washington, because if I remember correctly, her amendment was for $150 million, and Republicans repeatedly voted 0, 0, 0, 0, and finally broke down and agreed to $75 million and lowered the amount.
Well, that's interesting, but the reality is that it's because of the presidential appointments to the Commerce Department in a view that somehow we're raping the oceans that we have these policies which don't make a lot of sense. So what's happening is this fishing industry has been devastated because of this mindset that is shared by people in my opponent's party that somehow we're doing everything wrong and the world's going to come to an end if we keep doing what we're doing. So that's what we need to change, is that mindset. Unfortunately, in the White House, that's probably a couple of years away. We have a chance at this election cycle to make a change both on the local level here as well as in Congress, and hopefully we'll do that.
Greg, please ask your question.
Okay, thank you. And this is for both candidates?
This is for both candidates, but it's first to Mike and then
Thank
the
you.
response by Ann-Margaret.
Mr. Boucher, this question has to do with tourism. What specific ideas do you have regarding the state's role in funding and supporting tourism generally and the promotion of Cape Ann in particular as a visitor destination?
Thank you, Greg. Yeah, Cape Ann, as we know, is a destination. We promote tourism here because it's one of the largest parts of the Cape Ann economy. You know, from the beauty and the artist colonies in Rockport and Rocky Neck to the old, fishing village here in Gloucester and many other parts in Essex, the shipbuilding and so on and so forth. So I've been a chamber member for the past 15 years with my business. Before that, I was part of the chamber when I was on the Board of Selectmen. I've always supported and will continue to support all the efforts of the chamber to get additional funding to promote Cape Ann. The Cape Ann Chamber of Commerce, you may or may not be aware. If you're not, please go on their website, look at what they've done for this community. It's unbelievable. And we know that in tourism, through various studies, that for every dollar that's spent on promoting tourism, $7 comes back to the community in return. So we should be doing everything we can to promote tourism and visitors coming to Cape Ann and helping. So I would continue to support the efforts of the chamber. One of the things I don't believe in doing is I don't believe I'm smarter than the next guy. In other words, I don't believe I'm smarter than the chamber, who studies this all the time. Just like in the schools, I don't believe I'm smarter than the teachers and the administrators in the schools. I think they're the experts. And so in all of these cases, I would defer to them and support them in their efforts to improve the schools and to improve the tourism here on Cape Ann.
Thank you, Greg. I've done a lot of work with many individuals in this room, and many individuals who either work for the chamber or are representative members of the chamber. So let me talk about specifically some of the things that I have done. One is reworking the tourism formula and adding additional dollars into tourism. And I recognize fully that $1 invested in tourism is going to yield many dollars back in terms of people visiting and people visiting our shops and spending their money here in Gloucester. $5 million invested in advertising in countries where we now have direct flights. We now have 5 more direct flights into Logan Airport. $5 million to advertise Massachusetts. So when somebody comes over from Saudi Arabia, when somebody comes over from Turkey, when somebody comes over from China, they say, well, maybe I don't want to go to New York right away. Maybe I want to stay in Massachusetts for a couple of days, and maybe I might want to go up to Cape Ann and see their beaches and see what they have to offer and see authentic New England colonial American life. The cultural districts. I helped John Keenan write the language for those districts. I worked in my second term to implement those districts. And I've worked with Rockport Music, $400,000 investment to keep donations coming in to allow it to be a debt-free organization right now. About $200,000 to the Rocky Neck Community Center at a pivotal time to make sure that they were able to meet their fundraising goals. Another $200,000 to the Cape Ann Museum, and I could go on and on and on with support for those institutions that benefit and promote our districts culturally and attract visitors. So with that, I would continue those efforts. And again, I will continue to file the budget amendment that says we should promote our cultural districts.
Thank you. We're going to go right now into their closing statements. I'll give them a moment to put that together and remind you that there will be a Gloucester Times debate with the same candidates. And who knows, they might talk about the Cape Ann Tool Company that night. I know Rockporters are hoping they'll talk about fluoride. The election is November 4th, and the Chamber will be holding another debate for the congressional candidates on October 29th. So.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for coming. I know that 7:30 for some people is a difficult task to get here and to be vibrant and awake, but you all came out today to listen to the issues, and that's really important to me. This campaign season, you'll see me knocking on doors. You'll see me jumping from coffee to coffee. You'll see me out on the street corner chasing down every vote. What's important to me is the opportunity to earn your vote, and I hope that I work towards that today here answering the questions. What's also important that I want to share with you is I have the experience. I dutifully have taken the time over the last 6 years to understand the state budget, to understand what a surplus means, to understand what the structural deficits are, so that I could work towards making sure that not only Cape Ann, but that the Commonwealth is number one. And number one, we are in so many fields. So I ask for your vote. I ask you to look at my record. I can promise you one thing, I won't run for my record. My record is my record, and it's a record that I am proud of. I ask you to look at my record. I ask you to look at the work that I've done, not only with you individually here in this room, but collectively with the community, to make sure that the state is number one, and more importantly, to make sure that Cape Ann is number one. Thank you.
I also want to thank the Chamber for hosting this event, thank the news organizations for participating, thank Gail McCarthy for timekeeping, and all of you for being here. As I'm going across this district, and I've been doing this since April, I've been knocking on doors. I've knocked on over 3,500 doors so far. And some of the things I find when I knock on those doors is people are really concerned about a few things. Number one is jobs. My opponent talks a lot about things she would do to bring jobs to Cape Ann, but if you actually look at the actual numbers, you don't see a lot there. There's not a lot there. So one of the things we need to do is some of the things I talked about, which is eliminating the inventory tax, creating a manufacturing zone here on Cape Ann for good year-round full-time jobs, and so forth. In addition to that, you'll see with taxes. My opponent mentioned she understands the state budget. Well, I don't think so. I'm in finance, and you don't seem to get it. You continue to raise taxes on individuals at every opportunity, the sales tax, the gas tax, on and on and on. These are things I will not do. There's a way to manage the budget without raising taxes on individuals, particularly when you have additional revenue coming in. And then finally, we need to reform state government. That didn't come up today. I'm a little disappointed. But we've seen case after case after case of the state government being out of control. And I haven't seen my opponent do a lot to affect that. We've seen the crisis at DCF with 3 children, sadly, losing their life under the care of DCF. We saw the case of the drug crime lab scandal. We saw the case of the drug compounding scandal. On and on and on. In addition to that, I don't have much time, so I'm going to mention I'm 100% in favor of transparency. We need to get all the votes in the legislature online, and not just that, but all the committee votes online. We should know how our legislator voted. Right now, my opponent claims she votes with Bruce Tarr. Go look it up. She doesn't. She votes an amendment after amendment against him. I thank you very much for coming. I really would like your vote. I'm going to be continuing knocking on doors, and I really appreciate it. Take care.
All right, thank you very much to both candidates, Mr. Boucher and Representative Ferrante. Competition brings out the best in everybody, so I wish you both the best of luck. I'd like to thank Bob Bisnick, today's moderator.